Hey there, sleepyheads. Welcome back to the channel. Before we drift into tonight's tale of the Lost Universe tales after the series ends, I'd love to know where in the world you're watching from tonight. And what time is it for you right now? Drop it in the comments below. It's always magical seeing how far and wide this sleepy little community reaches. All right, lights low, blankets up, let's begin. 1,000 years have passed since the song ended. The world of Ooo, once bursting with color and sound, now breathes in long, quiet intervals. The laughter, the music, the clash of swords and spells, all of it, has softened into something else, something quieter, something that feels like memory. If you were to stand where the Candy Kingdom once shimmered, you wouldn't find the pink towers or the bubbling streets anymore. Instead, you'd see a sea of pale glass, melted by time and sunlight. The ground ripples like frozen sugar waves. Flowers bloom in shades unseen before, their petals translucent, catching fragments of the past, as if light itself remembers. The air hums faintly, not with the voice of life, but with the residue of what used to be magic. It's a ghostly vibration, so soft it might be mistaken for the wind. Ooo no longer belongs to heroes or kings. It belongs to stillness. The ruins are not empty, though. Nature has returned quietly and without ceremony. Massive trees grow from the bones of candy walls, their roots winding through caramel foundations and ancient pipes that once carried bubblegum power. The sky is pale and slow-moving, washed in a sleep lavender hue. You can almost feel the years stretching thinly across the horizon, like the world is dreaming. The rivers of slime that once ran through the Land of Ooo have settled into still, glassy basins. Their glow has dimmed, but not vanished. At night, they light the landscape with a gentle, underwater gleam, a quiet reminder of when even the rivers had personalities, when even puddles could talk. Now they only reflect the stars, endless and patient. Far away, the ruins of the tree fort still stand, or what's left of it. Its trunk, now hollow and petrified, leans at an angle against the hillside. Moss drapes over its windows where once there were laughter and games. Inside, the floorboards have merged with the earth, the last remnants of home blending into the soil. And sometimes, when the wind blows just right, a faint sound echoes within, something like a whistle, or perhaps a snore. But it's only the wind through old wood, or maybe something else still sleeping there. It's strange how time doesn't destroy everything, it simply rearranges it. Where the Ice Kingdom once glittered with impossible blue towers, now lies an endless tundra of quiet crystal dunes. The ice has become sand-pale, glimmering under the faded sun. If you walk there, you might find shapes buried in the snow-glass, a crown cracked and fused with stone, fragments of a throne turned to frost dust. And deep beneath that frozen ocean, the last echo of the Ice King's magic still hums, not alive, not dead, just resting. The Land of Ooo has become a museum of forgotten miracles. Magic no longer roars, it whispers. Technology no longer hums, it sighs. Every inch of land feels like a sigh of the past. Yet even in this silence, something moves the quiet persistence of life. Strange flowers that only bloom at dusk. Shimmering insects that flicker like tiny lanterns. Small, half-dreaming creatures, wandering without names, born from the old world's leftovers. In the heart of what used to be the Fire Kingdom, the earth has cooled. The volcanoes no longer rage their mouths, now cradles for forests. Black soil gives birth to glowing fungi, spreading like constellations across the ground. The air there still smells faintly of smoke, but it's sweet now, the scent of the world healing itself. The old lava rivers have become warm streams, their surfaces dancing with lazy sparks of bioluminescence. The children of this era, whoever they might be, come here to bathe in the light, not knowing they are swimming in the veins of ancient flame. Sometimes when the air grows still and the night is long, an old echo passes through the valley's faint laughter, like someone remembering joy. The sound carries across miles of silence, and for a heartbeat, it almost feels like Finn and Jake never left. Their names are gone, forgotten by time, but the feeling of them, that sense of wonder, courage, and companionship, lingers like the scent of rain on ancient stone. Is not history. It's something gentler, something timeless. The people who live now don't know the heroes who came before. Their stories are not written in books because books turned to dust long ago. Instead, they are told through nature. A certain type of cloud that drifts over the horizon every spring is called the wanderer, said to carry the soul of the last adventurer. The rustling of grass in moonlight is believed to be the old song, a sound left behind by beings who once sang to the stars. The moon, cracked and scarred since the Mushroom War, now glows with a dim, healing light. Its craters have filled with crystal lakes, catching the reflection of Oo's slow rebirth. It watches quietly, as it always has, over the fragile remnants of what was once chaos and creation intertwined. The stars above it seem older now, slower, as though they too remember. Even time feels different here. It no longer marches forward. It drifts. Days fade into each other, seasons blending softly. The world caught in a perpetual twilight between the past and the next beginning. The trees grow slower. The rivers sleep longer. The air carries the scent of endings, but also of patience. The patience of a world waiting to dream again. And yet beneath the calm, something stirs. Not loud or sudden, just a flicker of remembrance in the dust. Somewhere beneath the cracked surface of Ooo, where the roots of the old world twist like veins, a faint pulse remains. It's not a sound, not quite a light, more like a heartbeat, slow, ancient, and impossibly familiar. The rhythm of adventure itself, refusing to disappear completely. The silence after the song is not empty, it's sacred. It's the sound of a universe sleeping after a long, wild story, and in that sleep, it dreams of what comes next. If you wander long enough through the remnants of Ooo, you begin to feel that the silence itself is alive, like the land is breathing softly beneath your feet. Every hill and valley feels aware, quietly remembering what it once was. Sometimes you might find fragments of the old world poking through the soil, a rusted sword handle, half buried in moss, a melted gemstone still pulsing faintly with stored magic, the corner of a mural showing two smiling faces, their colors washed away, but their warmth somehow still intact. No one remembers who made these things, yet no one dares to destroy them. The people of this new age treat the relics with gentle curiosity, like children who found seashells along a shore they don't yet know is sacred. They collect them, whisper to them, and sometimes even sleep beside them as if the objects themselves hum lullabies from a time before memory. The air itself feels thicker here, as if woven with stories that never fully left. When the wind moves through the ruins of the old Candy Kingdom, it carries a strange sweetness, faint, ghost-like, not quite sugar, not quite flour. Some say that scent is Princess Bubblegum's final experiment, a perfume of remembrance, designed to linger forever in the air. Others believe it's simply the earth remembering her the way trees remember sunlight, even in the dark. Further north, where the Ice Kingdom once loomed in frozen majesty, storms still roll over the horizon, but they no longer bring blizzards or thunder. Instead, they bring soft, crystalline snow that sings when it falls tiny, bell-like tones that fade as they touch the ground. The locals call it the sky's apology, believing it's the voice of a forgotten king, asking forgiveness from the world he once froze. They gather the singing snow and let it melt in their palms, saying it blesses their dreams with peace. And maybe it does. Because dreams are different in this world. They are quieter, slower, like the world itself is dreaming through its people. There are no nightmares, not in the way they used to exist. Fear has dissolved not through victory or conquest, but through age, the way a roaring flame eventually becomes the faint glow of embers. The land has grown gentler. The animals of Ooo, too, have changed. The great monsters of old, the hybrids, the beasts, the ancient elemental creatures are gone. In their place are smaller, stranger beings, tiny floating orbs that drift through the air, trailing threads of light. Serene, eyeless creatures that communicate through hums and warmth instead of speech. It's as if the world, once bursting with chaos and creativity, has distilled itself down to pure emotion, no longer trying to impress or survive, just to be. There's something peaceful about that. To imagine a world where no one fights for dominance, where no kingdom rises or falls, only the quiet exchange between living things and the earth that holds them. Perhaps this is what comes after adventure, the gentle exhale when everything that could be discovered has already been found. Still, here and there, nature's patience is interrupted by reminders of what once was. In a distant valley, overgrown with crystal vines, there lies an ancient tower, broken at its middle, yet miraculously upright. It was once part of the wizard city, though no one alive remembers such a name. Its stones glow faintly at night, illuminated by trapped spells from centuries past. On still evenings, if one listens closely, a voice murmurs from within the stone walls, half incantation, half lullaby, words without meaning, but full of longing. Some say the voice belongs to a wizard who loved the stars too much to let go. There's a story told among travelers about a figure who appears near that tower, a silhouette made of flickering blue light. It wanders between the ruins, carrying an invisible lantern as if searching for something it lost long ago. The locals call it the Keeper of Spells. Some believe it's the last trace of Simon Petrikov's consciousness, adrift and harmless, moving endlessly through the ghost light of his own magic. Others say it's just a trick of the glowing stones, but even if it is, it's a beautiful trick, the kind of illusion a dreaming world would make for itself. All around, the land is heavy with this kind of beauty, not the bright, vibrant wonder of adventure, but the dim, thoughtful glow of reflection. Everything feels older than it looks, like each moment carries 1,000 quiet years behind it. The rivers murmur with patience. The clouds drift without urgency. Even the stars seem content to take their time shining. The people who walk this earth have learned to live slowly, too. They measure their days not by hours, but by the songs of birds that only appear at dawn and dusk. They don't build cities anymore. They build gardens, wide and wild, letting nature shape their homes instead of walls. They see no need for progress, because progress belongs to a world that still dreams of ending. This world has already done that. What remains is peace, imperfect, mysterious, but soft enough to sleep in. And so, as night falls over the ruins of the old kingdoms, a new kind of life hums beneath the stars. It doesn't rush, it doesn't strive, it just is. And perhaps, in that stillness, lies the truest adventure of all, learning how to exist after the song has ended. In the quiet hours of night, when the winds hush and the stars lean closer to the earth, the land seems to breathe in unison, one vast, slow inhale beneath the sleeping sky. If you were to lie down on the ground, close your eyes, and listen carefully, you might hear it, that faint rhythm beneath the soil, a heartbeat that belongs not to any creature, but to the world itself. It's the pulse of old Ooo, still alive, still dreaming beneath layers of dust and time. The world remembers, even when names are gone. There are moments when the new generations wake from dreams they cannot explain, visions of glowing swords, of kingdoms made of ice and candy, of a boy with a golden hat standing beneath twin suns. They don't know these stories consciously, yet they appear again and again in paintings, songs, and bedtime whispers. No one teaches them, but somehow they remain, like myths seeded into the fabric of existence, refusing to fade. One such story tells of the boy and the dog of the first dawn. Children carve their likeness into wood, into shells, into the soft walls of their homes. A tall figure and a round one, simple shapes, but always together. The elders say it's a tale of harmony, that wherever the boy went, the dog followed, and wherever the dog wandered, the boy waited. It is said they kept the balance of light and laughter, long before the world grew quiet. No one knows their true names, yet somehow everyone feels they were real. Perhaps that's what immortality means, not endless life, but endless memory. There's another story, too, whispered by travelers who camp near the glowing lakes at night. They say that when the moon is bright and the air is perfectly still, you can see two shadows walking across the water's reflection. Their outlines ripple gently, one tall, one shorter, like two friends strolling side by side. When people approach, the figures vanish, leaving only circles of light where their feet once touched. Some claim it's just a trick of the reflection, the wind moving across the surface, but others believe it's something else entirely. Not ghosts, not spirits, but memories that learned how to walk again. In this world, even memories have weight. They linger in the soil, in the wind, in the starlight that falls gently each night. The constellations themselves have shifted slightly over the centuries, as though the stars wanted to tell new stories. Where once they formed the shapes of heroes and villains, they now weave softer patterns, endless spirals, loops, and arcs, symbolizing cycles rather than battles. The heavens, too, seem to have learned to rest. There's a sacred mountain to the east, made entirely of glassy stone, rising like a frozen wave above the plains. It glows faintly under moonlight, casting prisms across the sky. Locals call it the Echo Peak. They say that if you climb to its summit and whisper a question into the wind, the mountain will answer not with words, but with music. A soft hum, like a lullaby carried from another world. Scholars of this new age have studied it for generations, unable to explain how the sound is made. But the elders insist it's the voice of Ooo itself, the last echo of its once-living soul. And perhaps they're right. Because when the wind moves just right, the song of the mountain sounds eerily familiar. It carries fragments of an old melody, something playful, hopeful, the kind of tune one might hum on an adventure through meadows and monsters. A song that once belonged to a generation long gone. The song of a human boy and his talking dog. Time has softened even that melody, though. It no longer dances with the quick steps of adventure. It drifts, slow and wistful, like the earth itself trying to remember the rhythm of its youth. The people who hear it fall asleep to its sound, and when they wake, they always feel as though they've met someone kind in their dreams. In this new era, dreams hold more truth than history. They are how the world remembers what it was and quietly teaches what it will become. Sometimes, dreamers speak of an ocean that stretches into infinity, calm, glass-like, with islands of floating light. Others dream of a great golden tree reaching toward the stars, its branches heavy with glowing fruit that whisper forgotten names. No one knows if these are places that truly exist, or if they're simply the echoes of Oo's imagination. Maybe it doesn't matter. In dreams, the world rebuilds itself again and again, gently, endlessly. And so the silence that fell after the song has become something sacred, not an absence, but a cradle. The universe is not mourning anymore, it's resting. The chaos of creation has given way to the serenity of being. Even decay feels beautiful now, flowers blooming from rusted crowns, glowing moss covering the bones of ancient beasts, rivers tracing new paths through the ruins of castles. Every sign of death is also a promise of life, a quiet reminder that the end of one story is simply the beginning of another dream. If you could stand on one of Oo's high ridges now and look across the sleeping world, you would see something breathtaking, a mosaic of soft lights, a patchwork of nature and memory intertwined. The colors are muted but not dull. Every hue, every shimmer feels like it's been touched by age and love, and in that vast, tranquil silence, you'd realize something profound, that the end of adventure doesn't mean the end of wonder. It simply changes shape from laughter and danger to reflection and peace. The silence after the song isn't the end of the music. It's the rest between notes, the pause that allows the next melody to bloom. And somewhere beyond the veil of dreams and centuries, Ooo still hums softly to itself, waiting for the next dawn to rise. When morning returns to this quiet world, it doesn't arrive with fanfare or the blaze of sunlight like it once did. It seeps in gently pale light spilling over misty hills, painting the ruins in soft blues and golds. Dew clings to broken stones, turning every fragment of the past into a mirror that catches the dawn. The silence feels alive again, filled with the hush of awakening. Birds made of translucent feathers glide through the sky, their wings catching the light like glass. They don't sing loudly, they murmur, as if afraid to wake the sleeping world too quickly. Down in the lowlands, where the grass grows in ribbons of silver, tiny creatures crawl from their burrows to greet the first warmth of day. Some are remnants of Oo's past descendants of small candy critters or fireflies that once lit the Candy Kingdom streets. Others are new, unrecorded shapes of life, born from centuries of slow mutation and magic's quiet residue. They move without fear, knowing no predators, no wars, no noise, just existence simple, undemanding, peaceful. It's strange to think that once this land was filled with chaos and color, with stories that collided and burned like stars. Now it feels as though the universe has finally exhaled. What remains is a kind of perfection that doesn't strive for greatness, harmony too soft to notice at first, but deeply present once you listen for it. By midday, the air grows warm and the mist lifts, revealing the contours of the worldwide meadows, shimmering streams, ancient ruins half buried in vines. From afar, the remains of the tree fort glint faintly like a shrine of memory. It stands as a monument not to power or conquest, but to companionship. The roots that once reached deep into the soil now feed entire groves of glowing flowers. Each petal seems to hum faintly in the sunlight, a song without words, as though the earth itself hums back in contentment. Travelers who pass through this area sometimes leave offerings at the base of the tree, smooth stones, shells, small pieces of glass, not because they worship, but because they feel something here, an invisible presence that feels warm and kind. Many describe a sense of being watched over, though not in fear. It's more like being remembered, as if someone or something still lingers nearby, smiling through the branches. And maybe that's true. Somewhere deep in the soil, beneath layers of roots and time, there's a trace of energy that hasn't faded, a residue of the countless moments that once filled this place, laughter, sorrow, courage, friendship. It doesn't move, but it breathes, like a memory trapped in amber, glowing softly whenever the wind passes, Sometimes, when night falls again, faint golden lights flicker around the base of the tree. Some say they're fireflies. Others swear they've seen shapes within them, two small figures walking together through the glow, fading when approached. It's the kind of mystery that no one tries to solve anymore. This world doesn't hunger for answers like the old one did. It lets questions exist as they are open, quiet, infinite. Perhaps that's what peace truly means, not the end of curiosity, but the end of needing to understand everything. The people who wander this landscape have learned that lesson well. They don't chase the past. They live beside it gently, as one might live beside a river that never stops flowing. As evening comes again, the sky turns lavender, the sun dips low, and the world exhales once more. The glassy mountains catch the fading light, scattering it into thousands of tiny reflections that shimmer across the horizon. The air fills with a faint humming, the same low song heard the night before, the one that sounds like the world remembering itself. Children pause their games to listen. The elders smile knowingly, though none of them could say exactly where the sound comes from. It might be the wind, it might be the stars, or maybe it's the lingering echo of adventure itself still rippling faintly through the time. If you look up, you can see the stars appearing one by one. They shimmer differently now, like small, steady hearts pulsing in the distance. And among them, if you watch long enough, you might notice one star that flickers gold instead of white. It glows a little brighter than the others, as though it remembers being something else, a sword perhaps, or a beacon of courage once held by a human boy. The people of this age call it the Wanderer's Star. It's said to move slightly each year, as if it's still on a journey. They believe it watches over the world not as a god or protector, but as a companion to all who dream. And in that belief, something beautiful remains, the unbroken thread of connection, stretching across centuries, across worlds, even across the quiet end of everything. Now, when the night fully returns and the world settles into its slow rhythm once more, the silence feels less like an ending and more like a promise. The adventure may have ended long ago, but its echo still shapes the air, still glimmers in the rivers and the stars. Ooo may be gone, but its heart continues to beat softly, steadily in the dreams of the universe itself. For even when all the songs have faded, the silence that follows isn't emptiness. It's the sound of the world finally resting. The sound of everything that once was, whispering softly, I remember. Morning in this new world begins softly. Mist drifts through the valleys, curling around the ancient bones of kingdoms long forgotten. And deep in one of those valleys, where pink dust still lingers in the soil, something remarkable has taken shape. From what was once the heart of the Candy Kingdom, life has quietly evolved, not bright and sugary as before, but gentle and crystalline, like sweetness dreaming of itself. The land here glows faintly at dawn. The ground is covered in shards of translucent resin, each piece catching the sun and scattering it into pastel light. These are not the remains of candy anymore, but a new kind of substance, part organic, part mineral. The descendants of the candy people live among these glowing fields. They are not made of sugar, nor do they melt in the rain. Their bodies shimmer like carved glass, smooth and luminescent, their colors muted but beautiful, soft lilacs, pale blues, the faded pinks of an ancient sunrise. They call themselves the Lucents. Unlike their ancestors, who were born from science and sweetness, the Lucents are born from time. Their origins are natural now, if you could call anything in this world truly natural. They grow from the resin blooms that sprout in the old royal gardens, forming slowly over months, their shapes hardening and softening until they awaken with quiet eyes. Each Lucent remembers nothing of their birth, but they all share a strange sense of familiarity with the land, as though the ground itself hums in their bones. No one alive remembers Princess Bubblegum, but her essence still lingers here, not as a ghost, but as a kind of idea. Her experiments reshaped life itself, and those ripples continue to flow even now. The Lucents sometimes find fragments of old lab glass beneath their fields, fused into the earth like fossils. They polish these relics and keep them near their homes, believing them to be the crystallized thoughts of their creator. To them, Bubblegum is not a ruler or a scientist, but something gentler, the dreaming mother, the one who taught sweetness to live. They tell stories about her under the pale sky. Around small, glowing fires, they sing songs made from the hum of their own voices, soft tones that shimmer through the air like waves of light. Their melodies have no words, only emotions. When they sing, the crystals in the soil vibrate faintly, creating an echo that joins the song, as if the land itself still remembers the music of its first people. The Lucents do not build castles or walls. They have no need for protection or power. Their homes are grown from the resin itself, curved structures that resemble shells or petals, each one glowing faintly at night. Inside, the air smells faintly sweet, like honey and rain. They live in harmony with the world, drawing light from the sky and nourishment from the soil. And though they no longer taste sugar, they speak of sweetness as something spiritual, a memory that lives on and on the tongue, but in the soul. To them, sweetness means connection. It's the warmth between one Lucent and another, the shared glow when they gather close. When one of them is hurt or frightened, others surround them in silence, allowing their lights to merge until they pulse as one. They believe that by doing this, they heal each other not through medicine, but through remembering they are parts of the same song. Each evening, as the sky fades into its lilac twilight, the Lucents walk to the edge of their valley to watch the lights rise over the horizon. They call this ritual the listening. They believe that far away, beyond the mountains, the remnants of the old world still hum faint, distant echoes of a time when the air itself was alive with adventure. They close their eyes, tilt their heads, and wait for the faintest trace of that hum to reach them. Sometimes it does, a barely audible vibration that trembles through the still air like the echo of laughter too ancient to belong to anyone alive. When it happens, the Lucents bow their heads in silence, feeling something deep and inexplicable stir inside them. The same feeling their ancestors might have known when the world was filled with life and color and sound. Though they live peacefully, they are not without curiosity. Every few generations, a Lucent feels the pull to wander beyond the valley to seek the source of the hum. These wanderers leave behind their glowing homes, carrying with them shards of resin that emit their inner light. They follow the quiet song of the world, not to discover new lands or treasures, but to understand what their existence means. Most never return, but their stories travel back through dreams and whispers, as if the world itself carries their memories home. One such wanderer is said to have found a vast field of glass towers far to the east, where the light bends and splits endlessly. There the Lucent knelt among the reflections and saw thousands of faces looking back, all different, all ancient, all smiling. The wanderer did not understand the vision, but they brought back a single word to their people, a word that none of them had ever heard before. Ooo? They didn't know what it meant, but when they spoke it aloud, the world seemed to shiver, just slightly, as if something, somewhere, remembered. The Lucents began to use that strange word in their songs. It carried no meaning they could define, yet every time they sang it, their voices glowed a little brighter, and the crystals in the earth resonated like soft chimes. Soon the word became sacred to them, a tone more than a language, something felt rather than understood. They believed it was the sound of their own origin, a name given to the dream that had made them possible. Some said that Ooo was the whisper of the first sweetness that ever lived. Others believed it was the sound of the universe itself breathing the inhale of creation before the world took shape. But the oldest among them, the ones whose lights burn low and deep, said something different. They said that when the word Ooo is spoken with a true heart, the veil between what was and what is begins to thin. The air itself listens, and sometimes it answers. In the stillest hours of night, when the Lucent's valley lies in silence, faint shapes move through the mists, not threatening, not even alive in the way life is now. Their outlines, like afterimages of beings that once were. Some have round heads and little limbs, others are tall and crowned, their edges flickering like candlelight. They glide across the glowing ground as though following invisible paths. The Lucents do not fear them. They call them echo forms. They believe these are the shadows of the Candy people who once lived here, remnants of their essence caught in the strange energy of the land. The echo forms do not speak. They simply wander through the ruins, pausing at old places, the steps of what might once have been the castle, the fountain where laughter once rang, the cracked archways that no longer lead anywhere. When a Lucent encounters one, they bow their head and hum softly, offering light. The echo forms respond by flickering brighter for a heartbeat, and then fading into the mist. It is said that when this happens, the dream of the old world moves one step closer to peace. Yet there's something quietly haunting about this. The Lucents are not haunted by ghosts in the human sense, but by memory itself. The land around them hums with too many echoes, voices of adventure, of friendship, of battles and songs that once filled the sky. They live in a place that remembers more than they ever could. Still, they never try to erase that past. They treat it as part of their heritage, not a burden, but a foundation. The Lucents believe that they were never meant to replace the Candy people, but to continue them in a gentler way. Where their ancestors built, with purpose and science, they simply live with rhythm and care. Their sweetness isn't measured in sugar, but in the soft way they treat one another, in the patience of their songs, and in the light they share when darkness falls. They have no wars, no kings, no boundaries. Their only law is the glow. The glow is what they call the quiet pulse inside every Lucent, the faint inner shimmer that ties them to all others. It's said that when a Lucent's glow fades, they return to the soil, their light absorbed by the resin fields, feeding the next generation of blooms. They see death not as an ending, but as a soft merging, a return to the sweetness that connects everything. Sometimes when storms roll over the valley, flashes of lightning illuminate the resin hills, and for an instant, the Lucents glimpse shapes carved into the glass, ancient murals frozen in time. They depict the Candy Kingdom as it once was, towers of frosting, bridges of caramel, figures laughing under a golden sun. Yet even these images seem dreamlike, blurred by age and memory. To the Lucents, it feels as though they're watching another life, entirely a dream they once had, but can no longer recall in full. One legend says that somewhere beneath their valley lies the heart of sweetness, a buried core of pink light that once powered the entire kingdom. It was said to be created by Princess Bubblegum herself, a pulsing source of energy that could give form to life. Now the Lucents believe it still beats faintly under the ground, guiding their songs and dreams. Some wanderers even claim to have felt it, a warmth in the soil, like the touch of a sleeping giant's hand. But none have found it. Not truly. Yet they all know the rhythm, the faint pulse beneath their feet when they hum together. the way their voices sync with something deep and unseen. Perhaps the heart of sweetness is no longer a thing that can be touched. Perhaps it became them. The Lucent's lives continue with this quiet awareness, generation after generation. They tend to the glowing gardens, hum their songs, and teach their children the word Ooo. And sometimes, when the night sky is particularly clear, they see faint glimmers moving among the stars' shapes that look almost like faces, almost like old friends smiling down. They don't know why, but it makes them feel safe. And though none among them know the names Finn or Jake or Bubblegum anymore, they feel that their world is being gently watched over not by gods or rulers, but by the lingering warmth of stories once told and dreams once shared. As centuries pass, the Lucent's valley begins to shift once again. The glowing resin that makes up their bodies and homes grows deeper in color, soft blues becoming purples, and purples fading into a faint amber hue. The land itself seems to breathe with them, as though the entire region is alive, learning and dreaming alongside its inhabitants. Children are born with patterns etched naturally into their crystalline skin, gentle spirals that glow when they sing. These markings are said to be traces of the old world's magic, inherited not through blood, but through memory in matter. The elders often tell the little ones that these designs are blessings from those who came before, that the candy people, in their final moments, poured their essence into the soil so that light would never vanish from Ooo completely. Each year, the Lucents hold what they call the Festival of Melt, a gentle remembrance of their origins. They gather near the central lake, whose surface glows softly from the minerals beneath. At dusk, they begin to hum a low, resonant tone that ripples through the valley. It's said that this hum carries down into the buried ruins, stirring ancient echoes. The air thickens with the scent of something sweet and old faint, like sugar dust carried on the wind. No one remembers exactly what the festival honors, but everyone feels its meaning. As they sing, their light pulses in rhythm with the earth, and for a moment, the world around them seems to shimmer, the hills turning translucent, the stars bending gently overhead. In those moments, some claim to see figures in the glow, a laughing boy with a sword, a round creature with stretched limbs, a woman with long flowing hair playing a bass. Others say it's just the way the light plays tricks in the mist. But the Lucents don't question it. They simply keep singing, their voices overlapping like the rise and fall of tides. It's not about who those figures are. It's about remembering that something beautiful once existed here, something that loved the world enough to leave behind light instead of ruin. After the festival, when the glow has dimmed, the Lucents rest by the lake and share stories. Most of these stories have no clear beginning or end. They drift like dreams. One popular tale speaks of a sugar queen who shaped the stars and taught the rivers to hum. Another tells of two dreamers who wandered the horizon, carrying laughter in a bottle so the world would never be silent. The elders smile when they hear these stories. They know they are not quite right. The time has turned truth into poetry. But they also know that in every myth there lingers a seed of remembrance. Even if the names are gone, the spirit remains: kindness, adventure, curiosity, and love. These things echo longer than any castle or crown. As the night deepens, the valley glows from within. The Lucent's light seeps into the air like mist, drifting toward the stars, and above them, constellations flicker faintly, some in patterns no astronomer could name. To those who listen closely, it's as if the universe itself is joining in their quiet hum. The air trembles with gentle harmony, and the entire world feels like it's dreaming of what once was. But beneath all that beauty, something stirs. The ground beneath the valley carries a low, rhythmic vibration, faint but steady. The Lucents notice it when they sit in silence too long. It's not the heartbeat of any living creature, nor the echo of wind or rain. It's something older, slower. Some say it's the pulse of the heart of sweetness, still alive, still beating far below. Others whisper that it's the sound of the world itself turning in its sleep. Occasionally, when a storm passes through, the lightning strikes in strange patterns across the valley. The light doesn't burn, it dances, spreading along the crystalline ground like veins awakening. For a few moments, every surface glows brighter than ever before. The Lucents freeze, overwhelmed by the sight. In those flashes, they see fragments of something ancient. Candy towers rising from molten glass, rivers of frosting glimmering in the sun, and faces full of joy. Then, as the light fades, the visions vanish, leaving only silence and the faint sound of rain. The Lucents don't speak of these moments openly. They call them sweet dreams and treat them as blessings. They believe that the old world sometimes peeks through, showing them that it remembers, too. It's as if Ooo, or whatever remains of it, doesn't want to be forgotten completely. It wants to share one last smile, even if only through a storm's reflection. In time, small communities spread beyond the valley. Some Lucents wander far across the empty plains where ice once ruled, where forests turned to stone and seas retreated into dust. They leave trails of soft glow behind them, faint as candlelight on the horizon. Those who stay tell stories of their journeys, of vast ruins half buried under crystal dunes, of strange structures shaped like giant trees, and of lights flickering on distant mountains as if old machines were waking for the first time in centuries. No one knows if these wanderers find anything or if they simply dissolve into the endless night. But every few years, new songs return to the valley melodies no one taught, carrying the rhythm of faraway winds and unseen stars. The Lucents believe these songs come from those travelers carried home by the breath of the world itself. And so the cycle continues, the sweet descendants living quietly, singing to a memory that keeps singing back. Their existence isn't about survival anymore. It's about presence, about being part of the dream that never ended, only softened. In their shimmering stillness, the world of Ooo finds its gentlest afterlife, not as ruins, not as ghosts, but as quiet light breathing in the dark. Over time, the Lucent songs begin to change. The melodies that once honored the past slowly start to shape new stories, not about the old heroes, but about the world as it is now. The songs become quieter, slower, and filled with long pauses of silence, as though the world itself is breathing between verses. When they sing, the light that ripples through their valley changes color with the tone gentle pinks when they sing of kindness, soft greens for growth, and deep indigo when they sing of longing. And though the meaning of their words has shifted through generations, the emotion behind them remains deeply familiar. Some scholars among them, though scholars might be too strong a word, for there are no books anymore, believe that the Lucents' language evolved from the sound of Princess Bubblegum's laboratories long ago. The hum of glass machines, the bubbling of experiments, the cadence of her voice as she gave commands. All those tiny sounds, absorbed by time, might have reshaped themselves into something beautiful. When the Lucents speak now, their words resonate faintly, like the striking of a small bell. Each word leaves behind a fading tone, and when many Lucents speak together, their conversations form a quiet, musical harmony that can be heard from far across the valley. To travelers, if any still exist, it might sound as if the valley itself is singing softly in its sleep. They build no monuments. They craft no weapons. Their only structures are open shelters of fused crystal, curved like shells, reflecting the faintest sunlight. During the day, they shimmer softly in hues of gold and rose. At night, they glow from within, mirroring the constellations above. When storms sweep across the land, their homes sing the wind passing through their hollow edges to create long, low notes that echo over the hills. The Lucents believe this is how the earth reminds them it is listening. Sometimes, when a Lucent's light grows dim, they journey to the lake, the same lake where the festival of melt is held. They walk into its glowing shallows, their bodies shimmering brighter for a moment, then slowly dissolving into the water, returning to the cycle of light that births new life. Those who remain behind gather on the shore and hum softly, not in mourning, but in gratitude. In their culture, to fade is not a tragedy. It is a final act of sharing. The Lucents say that every flicker lost becomes another star in the sky. Yet for all their peace, there's still a mystery that tugs quietly beneath their calm world. A feeling that something once vast and wondrous still rests just beyond reach. Some of their travelers have spoken of hearing faint laughter carried on the wind, not cruel or mocking, but familiar, like the echo of joy itself. They say it comes from the direction of the ancient mountains to the west, where the land folds in on itself like the pages of a forgotten book. Few who hear it ever follow. The Lucents are not a curious people by nature, but every now and then one among them, a bright young glow filled with restless energy, leaves the valley to seek the sound. They carry with them only a small shard of crystal light to guide their way. Some never return, others come back wordless, their light pulsing in strange rhythms for days. When asked what they saw, they usually reply that it cannot be described, only felt. That beyond the hills lies a place where dreams still live, where colors move like thoughts, and where laughter never ends. The elders believe these wanderers have touched the outer edge of what remains of Oo's soul. Every few generations, a new kind of Lucent is born. Unlike their softly glowing kin, these rare beings shine with a steady golden warmth, almost like sunlight. They are quiet by nature, but when they sing, the valley changes. The resin fields bloom brighter, the old ruins shimmer, as though remembering themselves, and even the stars above seem to pulse in rhythm. The Lucents call them honey lights. They believe these rare souls carry the purest memory of sweetness, the last unbroken thread connecting them to the first candy people. One honey light, born many centuries after the last, was said to wander deep into the underground caverns beneath the valley. There in the shadows, they found the faint glow of something immense, a pulsing orb buried within layers of a crystalline stone. It radiated warmth and light, yet felt asleep, as if waiting for a song to wake it. The honey light sat beside it for many days, humming softly, and as they sang, the orb's rhythm began to match their own, slow and steady, like two heartbeats learning to breathe together. When the honey light returned to the surface, they said nothing. But that night, every Lucent in the valley awoke to find their light shining brighter than ever before. For the first time in countless generations, the sky blushed pink, as though dawn had returned to the world. Some say the heart of sweetness had finally stirred, recognizing its children. And so the Lucents continue, not a people of flesh and sugar, but of light and memory. The sweetness of the world no longer lives in candy or crowns, but in the quiet kindness that lingers after all stories fade. They are the soft aftertaste of a world once wild, now dreaming itself into peace. In their shimmering silence, the legacy of Ooo hums softly on gentle, luminous and eternal. And far beneath their glowing valley, the ancient heart of sweetness beats once more, slow and calm, like the pulse of a sleeping dream. Beyond the shimmering valley of the Lucents, past the quiet plains where crystal grass hums in the wind, lies a region that few dare to cross. The Lucents call it the Forest of Forgotten Names, a vast and ancient woodland where light bends strangely and time moves like slow water. It is not marked on any map, for maps no longer exist. The forest is remembered only through stories, whispered softly during long nights when the air itself seems to listen. Those who have wandered near its edge describe the trees as impossibly tall, their bark the color of dusk, neither black nor blue, but something in between. Their branches twist together above, forming a canopy so thick that only fragments of starlight pierce through. The air carries a faint shimmer, like distant dust, reflecting the remnants of magic. The wind that passes through this place hums softly, as though it's repeating something ancient and forgotten. The Lucents say that every breeze that moves through this forest once carried a name. The names of those who lived, who fought, who dreamed. Names that once echoed through the land: Finn, Jake, Marceline, Bubblegum, all now dissolved into syllables the world no longer understands. Over thousands of years, those names lost their meaning, but not their sound. The forest caught them, held them. And now, when the wind stirs, you can almost hear those forgotten syllables, swirling faintly through the leaves like a lullaby made of memory. No Lucent truly knows what lies within the forest. To enter is to risk being remembered by it. The legends say that when you walk beneath its canopy, the trees begin to whisper your name softly at first, then more clearly, until you hear it echo from every direction. If you listen too long, you might forget where you came from. The forest doesn't steal you maliciously. It simply keeps you, as it has kept so many before. It's as though the forest believes that no name deserves to be lost completely. Some believe this place grew over the resting grounds of ancient heroes, that beneath its moss and roots lie the remains of those who once saved the world, their spirits now diffused into the soil. Their essence has become part of the trees, feeding their endless growth. Each trunk might carry a memory, a touch of laughter, a moment of bravery, a tear shed long ago. It is said that sometimes, on windless nights, faint figures flicker between the trees, not ghosts, not echoes, but dreams given shape by the forest's will. The air here feels thick, like the moment between waking and sleep. Light filters through in soft ribbons, bending around invisible shapes. The ground glows faintly underfoot, a carpet of moss that pulses in rhythm with something deep below, perhaps the very heartbeat of Ooo, still faintly alive beneath centuries of quiet. And though no one claims to have reached the forest's heart, stories persist of those who tried. One tale tells of a young Lucent who wandered too far from the valley, drawn by the gentle sound of distant humming. They followed it for days, through meadows of glass and rivers made of slow-moving mist, until they reached the forest's edge. The moment they stepped inside, the air grew heavy and their inner glow dimmed, but curiosity guided them forward. The deeper they went, the more alive the forest felt. Every root and branch seemed to breathe. Every leaf shimmered with faint, unearthly color. And then, somewhere deep within, they found a clearing, a perfect circle, where the ground was smooth as glass. In its center grew a single tree, taller and brighter than all the rest. Its bark glowed with faint patterns, like runes shifting just out of comprehension. The Lucent approached, feeling warmth radiating from it, and when they touched the trunk, they heard voices, thousands of them, layered softly over one another, speaking in languages they didn't understand. But one voice stood out, calm, kind, familiar, though ancient. It spoke not with words, but with feeling. The Lucent didn't know how to describe it later. They said it felt like being remembered by someone you never met. They left the forest carrying a quiet sadness, a longing for something they couldn't name. From that day on, their light flickered differently, warmer, steadier, like a flame that knew where it came from. The Lucents who met them afterward said that when they spoke, their voice carried a faint echo, as though another presence spoke gently through them. They became a storyteller, wandering the valley and teaching the young about the forest, about how names are not lost when love remembers them, even if the world forgets. The forest of forgotten names became sacred after that. No one entered it without reverence. The Lucents built small shrines along its outer edge, smooth stones carved with the few words they still remembered from the time of Ooo. These weren't names anymore, but emotions. Words like joy, bravery, song, and hope. Each one glows faintly when the wind moves through, as if the forest reads them and nods. And sometimes, when the night is silent, and the stars fade behind cloud and mist, the forest hums back. A low, ancient tone that vibrates through the ground, gentle but vast, carrying with it the feeling that the world still remembers every heart that ever loved it. There are nights when the forest seems to awaken more fully, when the mist thickens, and the air fills with a pale golden glow that seeps through the trees like the first light of dawn. During these nights, the Lucents say the whispering hour begins. It is a moment when the border between memory and reality softens, when the voices within the forest can be heard more clearly. The whispering hour doesn't follow time as the Lucents know it. Sometimes it happens once in a generation, sometimes several nights in a row. The forest decides. When it comes, the wind carries faint melodies, snippets of laughter, fragments of songs long lost to the air. Some Lucents claim they can hear music made from instruments that no longer exist. Soft strums of a bass, the bounce of a viola, the airy tune of a flute made of glass. These sounds travel through the valley, and those who listen feel a calm so deep it makes them forget the boundaries of themselves. The elders believe that the forest remembers everything, even the moments that the world forgot. That every sound, every name, every kindness ever offered has found its way into its roots. They teach the young that to stand at the forest's edge and listen is to touch eternity in its gentlest form. It's said that the forest doesn't speak in words, it dreams. And when the wind carries its dream outward, those who hear it share in that endless, drifting sleep. But the forest isn't entirely still. Deep within its heart, change stirs quietly. The moss glows a little brighter each century, and new shapes rise between the trees' smooth, curved forms that seem to grow not from roots, but from memories themselves. Some resemble melted statues, others faint silhouettes of creatures and people, half-formed and luminous. The Lucents believe these are the forest's attempts to recall what once was, to rebuild from echoes. They are not alive, but not lifeless either, like reflections of souls too long gone, to return, yet too loved to fade completely. There is one such figure that stands taller than the rest, far within the center where the air hums loudest. The legends call it the Sleeper of Names. It resembles a giant, its form half submerged in the ground with vines and moss covering most of its surface. The Lucents who have dreamed of it, for few have truly seen it, describe its face as calm, eyes closed, lips curved in the faintest smile. Across its chest are etched countless symbols that resemble letters, but none can be read. Some say it was once a hero of the old age, one whose very name gave power to the land. Others think it is the forest's heart made flesh, the embodiment of remembrance itself. When the whispering hour begins, the sleeper glows faintly, veins of light pulsing through its stone skin. The air around it fills with the sound of 1,000 quiet breaths, and for a moment everything in the forest seems alive with harmony. The leaves shimmer in rhythm, the roots hum beneath the soil, and the air itself vibrates with a peace so deep it borders on sorrow. Then, just as suddenly, it fades, leaving only silence and the faint scent of rain. It is during these sacred hours that the Lucents sometimes gather at the forest's edge. They do not enter, but they hum softly, matching the rhythm of the forest's pulse. It is their way of saying thank you not to gods or kings, but to memory itself. Some carry small offerings made from the glowing resin of their own bodies, tiny orbs of light that they place between the roots of the outermost trees. Over time, the roots absorb them, and faint trails of brightness weave deeper into the woods, joining the network of light that lives within. There are many stories about what happens to those who do choose to enter during the Whispering Hour. Some say they vanish completely, their names joining the forest's endless choir. Others believe they are transformed, not lost, but remembered differently, like dreams waking into another kind of world. One tale tells of a Lucent child who wandered inside and never returned. But on the following night, the stars above the valley rearranged themselves into a new pattern, one that glowed brighter than the rest. The elders took it as a sign that the forest does not take, it transforms. No one can prove these things, yet none need to. The Lucents do not seek truth in the way old civilizations did. They live by feeling and rhythm. To them, the forest is sacred not because of what it hides, but because of what it reminds them. That to exist is to be remembered, and to remember is to keep something alive beyond time. Sometimes in their quiet songs, they include the sound of a sigh, long, low, and gentle, meant to imitate the wind moving through the forest leaves. They call it the breath of the forgotten, and when they sing it, the entire valley grows still, as though even the world itself is listening. One night, during the height of the Whispering Hour, a strange thing occurred, something that the Lucents would remember for generations, though no one could ever explain it fully. The air shimmered with a color none had seen before, a soft blend of silver and amber, as though the forest had decided to paint the night in memory itself. The hum of the forest deepened, vibrating through the stones and into the bones of every creature nearby. A young wanderer named Isra, who was known for her habit of walking too close to the forest's edge, felt the pull more strongly than ever before. The elders whispered for her to stay, warning her that the forest's song was not meant for the living to follow. But Isra was not afraid. She believed that the forest didn't want to trap it, wanted to show, and so, with her lantern dimmed to a faint blue glow, she stepped past the first line of trees and vanished into the mist. Those who watched said the light of her lantern pulsed once, twice, and then dissolved into the luminous fog. For days, no one dared to enter after her. The Whispering Hour had ended, and the forest had grown still again. The Lucents built a small cairn of smooth stones by the tree line in her honor, and left it there as both a warning and a promise. But on the seventh night, the cairn began to glow faintly the same hue as Isra's lantern. That night, the Lucents heard something new within the forest's hum, a voice singing. It was soft, so delicate that at first they thought it was just the wind, but then the melody grew clearer, a lullaby, woven of both joy and sorrow. The song spoke of a world of light beneath the roots, where every forgotten name becomes a star, and where even silence hums with memory. The voice was unmistakably Isra's. After that night, the forest began to change in small ways. Certain trees grew thin spirals of crystal from their trunks, and tiny orbs of light drifted like pollen to the air, shimmering with every breath of wind. The Lucents took it as a sign that Isra had not vanished. She had become part of the memory that lives within the wood. From that day on, the Lucents began to call her the Keeper of Echoes. They built soft, glowing shrines of moss and stone around the base of the forest, not to pray, but to listen. The shrines would vibrate faintly when touched, playing back whispers of the forest's dreams. Some days, those whispers carried faint memories of laughter. Other days, soft cries. Once an elder swore he heard the name Finn uttered in the wind, though none in the village understood its meaning. Oh, it was said quietly that perhaps some memories were older than even the forest itself. The Lucents began to pass down the story of Isra and the forest to their children, though each telling changed slightly. In one version, Isra found the sleeper of names and spoke her name aloud, awakening a dream that reshaped the forest. In another, she never returned because she became the forest. The glow of the moss was her breath, the hum of the roots, her heartbeat. Each version held a truth, though none could be proven. Centuries later, when the valley began to fade under layers of mist and time, travelers from distant lands would stumble upon the ruins of the Lucents' homes. They'd find spirals of light embedded in stone and strange symbols carved into tree trunks, pulsing faintly even in death. When the wind moved through, the faint hum could still be heard, a lullaby in a language that had long since vanished. And yet, the forest itself endured. Even as mountains shifted and rivers dried, it remained a single patch of endless green amid a world turning to gray. To those who wandered close enough, it felt alive in a way no other land did. The air shimmered softly, and sometimes, if one closed their eyes and listened, a distant voice could still be heard, the faint echo of Isra's song, carried through centuries of silence. Over time, the name Forest of Forgotten Names became a legend told across continents. Scholars tried to trace its origins, adventurers sought it out for glory, and mystics claimed it was a living bridge between the past and the next world. But none could ever find it twice. Those who claimed to have entered described it differently each time, as if the forest was never the same place twice. One explorer said it was made entirely of glass trees that whispered like chimes when the wind passed. Another said it was filled with enormous flowers that grew from the memories of old souls, each petal a fragment of time. There was one detail all agreed upon, however. Somewhere in its depths stood a figure, vast and peaceful, with eyes closed in eternal rest, a being whose body was etched with the names of countless lost civilizations. Some said it breathed faintly, its chest rising and falling once every 1,000 years. Others believed it was only the wind. And yet, every telling, every dream, every story about the forest ended the same way, with a sense of calm, of quiet reverence. It was as if the forest itself was a lullaby, not sung to the living, but to time. The Lucents had faded. The names they guarded had become whispers, but the forest endured. It remembered everything. It carried every sound, every word, every dream. It became the keeper of all who were ever loved. And in that silence, that vast, breathing stillness, the world seemed to hum softly to itself, as though reminding the stars that even forgotten names still echo in the dark. As ages drifted onward, the forest of forgotten names grew into something beyond the bounds of the natural. It became an ecosystem of memory, alive not in body but in thought. The trees no longer grew in straight lines, nor by the logic of roots and water. Instead, they followed the shape of remembrance. Branches reached toward places where laughter once echoed, or where tears had soaked into the ground. Paths twisted in on themselves like dreams, leading wanderers through moments rather than directions. Sometimes a traveler might step beneath the canopy and find themselves walking through someone else's recollection, standing in a vision of a home that had long since vanished, or hearing the soft sound of a lullaby, sung by a voice that belonged to no one anymore. The forest did not deceive. It simply remembered too deeply. Its soil was layered with centuries of forgotten feeling, and its rivers shimmered with stories unspoken. There was a strange peace in this place. The world beyond the forest had grown colder, quieter, almost sterile in its long passage through time. Cities had become pale things, filled with glass and silence. The age of magic was a myth to most, and adventure itself was considered an ancient ritual of the primitive past. But in the forest, there was still warmth, the faint heartbeat of something that refused to die. Those few who entered and returned often spoke of seeing lights in the distance, moving gently through the trees like drifting souls. Some claimed these were the memories of the Lucents, forever tending to their sleeper beneath the roots. Others believed they were fragments of the candy descendants, long absorbed into the great weave of the forest's mind. Whatever they were, they seemed kind, always keeping their distance, but never frightening those who saw them. Every few centuries, a new wanderer would stumble into the forest by accident drawn by dreams, or the inexplicable feeling of being called. Most would leave changed. Their eyes would hold a strange softness afterward, and they'd speak with an uncanny patience, as if they'd glimpsed the long rhythm of eternity. One such wanderer, a scholar from the remnants of the old crystal cities, wrote that the forest seemed to hum in the same frequency as the stars, that when he lay upon the moss and listened long enough, he could hear constellations moving. In the deepest glade, where the mist shimmered brightest, there stood something monumental in ancient form, neither tree nor stone. It resembled a sleeping giant covered in luminous vines, its surface etched with words too old to read. The air around it trembled faintly, like a breath being held forever. Some called it the sleeper of names, though others whispered that it was something far greater, a relic of the world before Ooo, or perhaps the last dream of Ooo itself. When the wind swept through its hollow, it carried voices, fragments of memory, bits of laughter, sighs of farewell. The sound was not mournful, it was serene, like the soft sound of waves rolling through eternity. Some said if you spoke your name aloud before it, the forest would remember you long after death. A few brave souls tried. None were seen again. But on quiet nights, new names would appear faintly glowing upon the sleeper's skin. It is said that deep within that glade, time itself slowed to a hush. Seasons barely touched it. Leaves would fall, yet never decay. Light would linger like breath on glass. Perhaps that was the secret of the forest, that it existed outside of time, in a place where forgetting was impossible. Every life, every whisper, every heartbeat that ever touched Ooo was woven into its endless lullaby. And if the listener were to close their eyes and stand there long enough, they might hear more than wind. They might hear stories that predate their own birth, faint tales of fire and ice, of heroes and monsters, of kingdoms built from sugar and love, and skies filled with song. They might hear the quiet laughter of Finn and Jake drifting through layers of moss and memory, echoing softly like distant bells. Because in some way, this forest, this endless cradle of remembrance, is Oo's last dream, a place where adventure sleeps, not dead but resting, waiting for some far dawn to wake again. The magic that once danced through candy and crystal and fire did not vanish. It retreated here, folding itself into soil and whisper, waiting for the next world to remember how to listen. And so, as the millennia pass, the forest keeps breathing slow and eternal. It holds the pulse of everything that ever was, from the laughter of gods to the sighs of mortals. And though no one may ever again know the names of those who came before, the forest remembers. It hums softly in the dark, like a mother singing her child to sleep. That is the legacy of the forest of forgotten names. Not a warning, not a curse, but a lullaby for the universe itself. A song of what was, what is, and what may dream again. In the 1,000 years that followed after the forest had quieted and the world had settled into a strange and tender peace, something unseen began to stir. It wasn't life as people knew it, nor death exactly. It was the faint afterglow of a force once woven through everything a breath older than history itself. They called it the ghosts of magic. When the last great spell was cast, somewhere in the forgotten heart of Ooo, the raw current of magic that once danced freely through rivers, mountains, and stars began to fade. But like the warmth of a fire after its embers die, it didn't vanish. It lingered. It softened into something gentle and ungraspable, a kind of memory made of light. For centuries, no one noticed. The world had grown too quiet, too focused on survival, too human in its rhythm. Yet in the lonely corners of existence, in caves where ancient runes still hummed faintly, in the air above forgotten lakes, magic whispered to itself. Those who were sensitive to it said it felt like a sigh caught between worlds, neither alive nor gone. The ghosts of magic were not beings in the way mortals understood. They had no faces, no voices, no form. And yet, at dusk, when the horizon dimmed and the sky shifted into its deep violet hues, you could sometimes see faint trails of light moving as though something invisible were drifting past. Like the shimmer of heat over sand, these trails rippled with colors not found in nature, the soft blue of dreamlight, the pale gold of a memory, the faintest pink of old enchantments. In the far remains of the Ice Kingdom, now long melted into glassy plains and shallow lakes, there were said to be places where the ghosts gathered. The descendants of those who lived nearby claimed they could hear songs at twilight, faint hums rising from the water's surface, forming echoes of melodies once sung by Princess Bubblegum's old instruments, or spells once spoken by Marceline's hand. They said that if you sat still and listened, you could feel the echoes brushing past your skin like cool breath. No one feared them. Magic, even in death, had never been cruel in Ooo. It had been wild and strange, and sometimes sorrowful, but always alive, always yearning to connect. These ghosts were the remnants of that yearning, the after-image of what it meant to believe in something greater than reason. The people of this later age came to think of the ghosts not as spirits, but as echoes of creation, what remains when wonder itself refuses to fade. In old times, wizards and witches drew their power from the living pulse of the world. But now those old arts had become like myths told beside gentle fires. There were no more floating crowns, no fire-shaping hands, no shape-shifting dogs or candy-born monarchs. Instead, there were children who dreamed strange dreams, who, without knowing why, could make flowers bloom from stone or cause shadows to flicker in patterns that sang. Their elders called them touched by the ghosts. These children would often wander off at night, guided by something only they could sense. They'd sit by the lakes, tracing their fingers through the reflected stars, whispering softly to the rippling air, as though speaking to old friends. And sometimes, when the wind was still, the ripples would answer, moving in rhythm, shining faintly. It wasn't communication in the old sense. It was resonance. The remnants of magic still recognized the wonder within the hearts of the young. Scholars of this distant era began to study these occurrences, though their science could never truly define them. They built instruments to measure the phenomenon, but the readings changed depending on who was looking. Machines would hum when certain songs were sung, or when someone recited stories of the old heroes. It was as if the ghosts responded not to knowledge, but to emotion, to reverence, to love, to memory. The people began to understand something profound. Magic in its truest form had never been a system or a science. It had been the emotional language of the universe, the way the world expressed its dreams. When the physical forms of wizards, princesses, and demons faded into history, the emotions that powered their spells remained like faint constellations in the dark, each one still shining, even after the stars themselves had cooled. In the ruins of what was once the Candy Kingdom, long overgrown with silver grass, travelers would sometimes find strange phenomena: air that shimmered with colorless light, stones that hummed softly when held close to the chest, or entire valleys where gravity seemed to bend like a sigh. Some believed these were remnants of spells once cast by Bubblegum, herself pieces of molecular magic so deep in the world's foundation that they refused to vanish. Others said that in the stillest hours before dawn, if one stood quietly amid those ruins, they could hear faint laughter echoing through the air, light, kind, and full of warmth. Some swore it was Bubblegum's voice. Others said it belonged to Marceline, her song forever looping somewhere in the folds of memory. Perhaps, in truth, it was both their final duet, replaying endlessly through the veins of the world. And while no one could ever prove it, many believed that these ghosts of magic, these flickers of color and hum, were the last guardians of Oo's legacy. They drifted through the ruins, through forests and skies, unseen yet ever present, keeping the balance of wonder alive long after the age of heroes had ended. Some said that when the ghosts gathered, the air felt charged with an ancient kindness, like being watched over by the memories of those who once protected the land. Farmers who worked the valleys beneath the old mountains told stories of soft glows moving across their fields on moonless nights, bending the crops gently without breaking a single stem. They called these glows harvest spirits, believing they were the remnants of spells cast long ago to nourish life. Others thought they were pieces of elemental magic, fragments of earth, fire, water, and air that still lingered in harmony, echoing the balance that kept Ooo alive for so long. There were times, rare but certain, when these ghosts became visible to the naked eye. During powerful storms, when lightning illuminated the horizon, shapes could sometimes be seen within the rain. They were not human or beast, but shifting silhouettes of light figures that seemed to dance across the clouds. They carried no malice. Instead, they moved as if in remembrance, as though reenacting the beauty of old spells. The people of that era would watch in quiet awe, calling these moments echo rains. For them, it was a reminder that the world still remembered its old rhythm. In one valley, a child once claimed to have met a ghost that spoke to her. She said it was not a spirit, but a presence made of song, a melody that wrapped around her thoughts and showed her images of the past. She saw flashes of candy towers melting into rivers of light, a golden crown sinking beneath an ocean of snow, and a single blade of grass growing from a cracked stone. The song told her without words that all things which begin in wonder must someday return to it. She carried that message her whole life, and when she became an elder, she built a small shrine beside the ruins where she first heard the song. Travelers who visited the shrine later said that the air there shimmered faintly, and if you hummed softly, the world would hum back. It became known as the Shrine of the Echoed Spell, one of the last sacred places of that future world. No priest tended it, no temple surrounded it. It was simply a space where the ghosts of magic gathered, a silent meeting place between the living and the remnants of enchantment. Some scholars began to believe that these ghosts were not random after-effects at all. They thought the ghosts were choosing to remain, bound to the memory of what they once protected. One old philosopher wrote that magic was never destroyed, only changed, that it simply shed its form the way a butterfly leaves its cocoon. In this new world, stripped of wands and rituals, magic had become something purer, the memory of connection itself. This idea transformed how people viewed their lives. If magic lived in memory, then every act of kindness, every song, every small wonder was a continuation of the old enchantments. It meant that the world was still, in its quiet way, full of sorcery, just gentler now, woven into the rhythm of existence rather than bursting through it. The people began to honor this invisible magic by living slowly, cherishing stillness, and listening to the wind as though it were speaking. There were those who still sought to harness the ghosts, to awaken them fully. A few scientists built strange devices powered by resonance crystals, trying to capture the faint vibrations the ghosts gave off. They believed that if they could amplify these energies, they might revive the old magic in its full strength. But each attempt ended the same way. The instruments would hum beautifully for a time, filling the air with shimmering color, and then fall silent, leaving behind only warmth. It was as if the ghosts refused to be owned or confined. One observer described the aftermath of such an experiment. He said the air shimmered for hours afterward, and within the light, he could see the faint outline of a figure sitting cross-legged, playing a guitar that no longer existed. The melody was haunting and sweet, a tune that seemed to carry across the centuries. He didn't recognize it, but some who heard his description believed it to be one of Marceline's old songs, her final notes drifting across eternity, forever looping through the fabric of magic. It became clear that the ghosts were not the past haunting the present. They were the memory of beauty refusing to die. Each shimmer of light, each hum in the distance, each whisper in the trees was the world remembering how to feel wonder, a gentle reminder that even after the age of spells and kingdoms, something sacred still pulsed within the quiet. In the centuries that followed, the ghosts of magic became part of the rhythm of daily life. They were no longer seen as rare wonders, but as quiet companions to existence always near, always watching. Travelers would tell stories of waking to find faint lights hovering above sleeping fields or strange symbols of warmth traced in the frost upon their windows. When asked to explain them, the elders would simply smile and say, "That's the old world, remembering us." In the ruins of an ancient library, one that may have once belonged to Princess Bubblegum, a group of historians found what they called the last spell book. Its pages had long since turned to dust, but its bindings pulsed faintly with a golden hue. Inside, written in the softest etchings of light, were lines that no one could fully translate. The language was fluid, always changing, almost alive. When scholars tried to record the words, they would rearrange themselves, forming new shapes, as though reacting to thought or emotion. It was said that the book was not meant to be read but felt, that when someone placed their hand upon it and thought of something pure love, forgiveness, wonder, the book would glow brighter, humming faintly with tones of forgotten spells. To those who listened closely, it sounded like laughter, the laughter of children playing in candy streets, of Jake's easy joy, of a world that once knew no separation between life and magic. The book became a relic of comfort, a gentle reminder that even after everything, the essence of Ooo still smiled through time. Over time, small temples began to appear, not built in devotion to gods or kings, but to the spirit of the old wonder. They were quiet places made of soft stone and open roofs where people could sit and feel the gentle hum of the world. Inside each temple, instead of statues, there was a single floating orb of light, said to be a gift from the ghosts. These orbs would change color depending on the seasons, glowing pale green in spring, amber in autumn, and soft blue in winter. When touched, They would vibrate faintly, resonating with the heartbeat of whoever stood near them. It was believed that these lights were not physical at all, but crystallized emotion, the residue of spells cast from joy. The descendants of those who once lived in the Candy Kingdom believed that these orbs were the souls of the very first magical beings, finally finding peace. To them, every flicker of color was a heartbeat from the past, a memory saying, "We're still here." But not all ghosts were kind. Some were confused, caught between the fading layers of reality and the echo of their former selves. They wandered the wastelands of forgotten magic, replaying their last moments endlessly, like broken music boxes. These were called the hollow echoes, and though they were rare, travelers who encountered them spoke of feeling sudden waves of sadness, not fear, but sorrow so deep it brought tears without reason. They said that the hollow echoes were fragments of spells cast in grief remnants of magic that once came from loss or heartbreak, unable to dissolve peacefully. Still, even these mournful spirits were treated with compassion. Pilgrims built quiet cairns where they appeared, singing soft songs to guide them back into stillness. They believed that if enough love surrounded an echo, it would fade into light, joining the gentler ghosts that watched over the world. In that way, even sorrow became part of the healing rhythm of time. Somewhere beyond the known lands in the remains of the old nightosphere, a pale rift in the sky still flickered with violet light. It was faint now, barely visible, like a scar that refused to close. Some said it was where the last great magic had been released, the place where the final barrier between the mortal and the infinite dissolved. On certain nights, you could see silhouettes drifting in and out of the rift, flickering shapes that resembled wings, tails, and shadows. The old storytellers said those were the last spirits of chaos, remnants of the great beings who once toyed with fate itself. Yet even they seemed gentler now, softened by the patience of eternity. It was here that a quiet legend began to form of a being who wandered the world collecting fragments of old enchantments, gathering them into a great sphere of light. Some said it was a new kind of wizard. Others thought it was the spirit of magic itself trying to find form again. Travelers who claimed to have seen this figure described it as cloaked in shifting colors with eyes like tiny suns. Wherever it passed, the ghosts would gather, glowing more brightly as if recognizing an ancient kin. It never spoke, nor did it stay for long, but its presence left traces small miracles, gentle awakening, a dried flower blooming again in winter, a pond rippling with light though no wind stirred, children laughing in their sleep at dreams they couldn't remember. These moments reminded the people that the ghosts were not fading. They were preparing, collecting themselves, waiting for something. Perhaps, they thought, magic was not dying at all. It was dreaming, resting quietly in the folds of time until the world remembered how to believe again. And when it did, the ghosts of magic would awaken not as spells or wizards, but as a single breath across the universe, the echo of wonder returning home. The legend of the ghosts grew deeper with each passing century until it no longer belonged to scholars or priests or dreamers. It belonged to the night itself. Entire generations were born beneath skies faintly shimmering with those quiet lights, the remnants of the old world's heartbeat. Children would reach their hands toward the drifting glows, giggling when the air tingled softly against their skin. To them, it was never something to study or fear. It was just the way the world breathed, slow, calm, eternal. And yet, as with all things, time reshaped the story. The Descendants of Ooo came to call this unseen network of energy the gentle veil, the last skin of the universe's magic, resting between what is seen and what is felt. The veil was not a wall or a boundary. It was a lullaby humming through existence, the quiet rhythm that kept creation from falling asleep entirely. The elders said it was woven from every song ever sung, every spell ever cast, every wish ever whispered beneath the stars. In the twilight of one forgotten city, a place once surrounded by glass towers and now half buried under moss, there lived an old storyteller named Saren. She was said to be one of the last people who could still hear the veil clearly. Each night she sat by a pool of silver water, her voice soft as moonlight, telling the children the ancient stories of Ooo, of the girl of bubblegum, the boy who loved adventure, the dog who stretched like sunlight, and the vampire who sang to the stars. And as she spoke, the air around her would begin to glow faintly, as though the ghosts themselves leaned in to listen. Those who watched swore that the lights formed shapes, sometimes a sword, sometimes a guitar, sometimes a swirl of candy-colored mist. They believed that through her words the ghosts remembered themselves again. The children listened, entranced, and afterward they would say they dreamed of faces they'd never seen, yet somehow knew faces filled with warmth, eyes full of laughter. Saren once said something that became etched in the hearts of her listeners. Magic doesn't vanish when it is forgotten. It waits to be remembered in kindness. To her, the ghosts were not remnants of power, but echoes of love for adventure, for friendship, for the fragile beauty of being alive. And perhaps that was the truest form of magic left. As the veil shimmered across the sky, some began to believe that the ghosts were slowly gathering for a purpose. Strange phenomena started to occur again. Rivers glowing under new moons, mountains resonating like quiet bells, the night air filled with unseen harmonies. Many thought it was a sign that the old magic was returning, not as it once was, but as something gentler and more complete. In the desert ruins of the old Fire Kingdom, a nomad once described seeing a great pulse of color rise from the horizon, an aurora made of every shade imaginable, expanding like a heartbeat across the stars. For a moment, the whole world seemed to hold its breath. Animals grew silent, winds stilled, even the oceans seemed to calm. And then, in the deepest hush, a soft melody began to play. It wasn't loud or grand, it was simple, like a lullaby sung by someone remembering a dream. Those who heard it wept without knowing why. It was said that the ghosts had joined their song into one, creating the first harmony of the new age. After that, the world began to change in small, beautiful ways. Flowers that hadn't bloomed in centuries awakened again. The stars seemed brighter. People began to feel more connected to one another, their dreams aligning with uncanny gentleness. Some said the ghosts had woven themselves into everything, into breath, into water, into thought, becoming part of the living once more. And though few could see them now, everyone could feel them. The hum of the ghosts was in the air's rhythm, in the rustle of leaves, in the silence before dawn. The world was no longer haunted by magic. It was held by it softly, lovingly, like a child being cradled to sleep. Somewhere beyond the edges of the known world, where even the stars grew thin, it was said a faint shape began to stir, vast and luminous, like a figure turning over in a dream. Those who watched from afar could only describe it as a ripple in the sky that looked like someone smiling. They didn't know who or what it was, but they felt calm when they saw it. Perhaps it was the spirit of the old universe waking for a moment, recognizing its reflection in the new. Or perhaps it was simply the last gift of the ghosts, a final sign that magic had never truly died, only softened into love. And as the night deepened and the stars leaned closer to listen, the world itself seemed to sigh a long, peaceful breath, carrying the echoes of every story that ever was. Magic had become silence now, but not an empty one. It was a silence filled with memory, warmth, and waiting. The ghosts of magic were never gone. They were everywhere, quietly singing through the folds of time, reminding all who dream that wonder never ends, it only changes its shape, glowing softly in the dark until someone remembers to listen again. When the ghosts of magic finally faded into quiet peace, the world that remained was still but not empty. Out of the long silence that followed, new forms of life began to stir, not born of spellcraft or science, but from something gentler, something that had been growing quietly all along. The new inhabitants of the world after Ooo were not born in fire or chaos. They rose from the soft soil, from drifting light, from dreams too faint to be remembered by anyone but the earth itself. The first to awaken were the glassfolk beings whose skin shimmered faintly in sunlight, their bodies clear as crystal and filled with soft, glowing veins that pulsed like fireflies. They emerged from the places where the ancient Candy Kingdom once stood, where sugar had long since melted into sand and hardened again into strange glass formations. Their voices were like music through wind chimes, and when they spoke, the air around them shimmered. Some said they were the descendants of the Candy People, their essence transformed through centuries of stillness and starlight. The glass folk did not build cities. Instead, they wandered the quiet plains, tending to glowing orchards and rivers of molten sugar glass that cut across the landscape like veins of light. They lived without war, without rulers, their lives centered on memory, not their own, but the memory of everything that came before them. In their rituals, they would gather near pools of light and sing softly, retelling stories they didn't fully understand. Names like Princess and Finn and Treefort would drift through their songs, spoken with reverence and affection, though none knew their meaning anymore. To them, those names were simply sacred sounds, the heartbeats of the world that gave them life. Beyond their glowing plains, in the ruins of what was once a deep mountain range, another kind of being took form. These were called the Stone-born. They were creatures of living rock, moss, and faint crystal dust, shaped by the same slow patience that formed the world's bones. The Stone-born were quiet, deliberate beings who spoke only when necessary. Their eyes glowed with the color of dawnlight, and their words carried the weight of time itself. Some say the Stone-born were shaped by the lingering essence of elemental magic, the grounding remnants of the earth elemental, long after her spirit dissolved into the soil. They were not her children exactly, but echoes of her strength and calm. When they walked, flowers grew in their footprints. They built small sanctuaries in mountain hollows, where they sat for ages listening to the hum of the world. They did not seek power or expansion. Their purpose was simple to remember through stillness. But perhaps the most curious of all the new beings were the dreamers of the sky luminous, floating forms that drifted through the upper air, neither fully alive nor entirely spectral. They were thought to be born from the gentle veil itself, fragments of the old universe's soul that refused to rest. They glowed with soft colors ever-changing, and their bodies would ripple like clouds in the wind. The dreamers never spoke, but when they passed overhead, those below could hear faint melodies, like songs remembered from another lifetime. The glass folk saw them as guardians. The Stone-born believed they were ancestors, and the children of both would sometimes chase their shadows across the fields, laughing as the air hummed around them. It was said that the dreamers carried the thoughts of all that once lived, the laughter of heroes, the songs of the past, even the whispers of forgotten gods. And when they drifted low enough, sometimes, just for an instant, you could hear the words of the old world calling through them, gentle and warm, as though the stars themselves were speaking in their sleep. In time, these three peoples, the glass folk, the Stone-born, and the dreamers, began to shape the new balance of existence. Their world was not divided by kingdoms or greed. It was bound together by rhythm and remembrance, by the quiet understanding that they were all born from something beautiful that had ended long ago. There were no wars, only cycles of gathering and release, light and rest, creation and stillness. Where Ooo had once been filled with the constant motion of adventure, this new age was filled with the grace of reflection. Life moved slowly now, like the tide of an eternal dream. The world no longer rushed toward destiny. It drifted softly, as though it knew that everything worth being had already been dreamed once before. And yet, beneath this calm surface, there was curiosity. The new inhabitants could sense something within themselves, a pulse, a spark, a question. They could feel that they were not the first world, nor would they be the last. The air itself seemed to hum with unfinished thoughts, like a story still being told beneath layers of silence. Sometimes, in the still hours of night, the glass folk would gather by the glowing rivers, watching the stars shift above them. Their reflections shimmered like ghosts across the water. They would ask the stone-born what came before them, and the stone-born would answer only with gentle smiles. The dreamers, floating high above, would cast ripples of color through the sky patterns shaped like trees, crowns, swords, and hearts, images of things that no longer existed, yet lived on in the rhythm of the air. Those patterns were more than beauty. They were memory trying to speak again. The new world, though tranquil and wise, was still dreaming, and somewhere, deep within its sleep, echoes of the old heroes stirred, waiting for the right moment to awaken once more. The dreamers' songs, though wordless, carried a strange kind of gravity, one that could bend memory itself. When they drifted over the valleys, plants would bloom out of season, or colors would shift in the leaves as though time had forgotten its rules. The glass folk often took these visitations as signs, gentle reminders that the world was still alive and changing, still dreaming new dreams in the silence left behind. Some nights, when the auroras stretched low enough to touch, the glass folk would hold what they called the Festival of Reflections. Entire fields would light up with their glowing forms as they gathered around vast, mirror-like lakes. They would hum in unison, each voice delicate and crystalline, blending into an ocean of sound that rippled across the night. The water reflected not only their faces, but fragments of something older, flashes of forests, of candy towers, of the warm pink glow of a kingdom that once was. None of them knew what those visions meant. They only knew it filled their hearts with a strange, peaceful sadness. The stone-born often watched from afar, standing like mountains beneath the stars. Though they did not sing, they understood the purpose of the gathering. To them, the festival was not just a remembrance, but a promise, a quiet pact between the living and the memory of life itself. The stone-born believed that each voice added to the hum of the world kept the old dreams alive just a little longer. They would place their stone palms against the ground and listen, feeling the vibrations travel through the soil like heartbeat after heartbeat. And sometimes, from within the earth, they would hear faint responses, low, rumbling tones that might have been the whispers of older beings still sleeping deep below. It was said that the spirit of the earth elemental herself still lingered in those depths, no longer a conscious mind, but an immense presence, peaceful, eternal, dreaming the world into balance. Above them all, the dreamers of the sky would drift slowly, their colors changing in rhythm with the glass folk's songs. They were said to be shapeless, but now and then witnesses would swear they saw fleeting forms take shape among them, a long sword glowing faintly blue, a round head with long ears, a crown of red jewels, a hand reaching out toward the horizon. These forms would shimmer, then dissolve into light again, leaving behind trails that glowed for days. The glass folk called these moments echo images. They believed they were gifts, gentle glimpses of the memories that made them who they were, reminders that they were born from love, friendship, and the persistence of stories. The stone-born called them reflections of the core, believing that the universe itself was showing its own history through the movement of light. But the dreamers, silent as ever, offered no explanation. They simply moved onward, pulsing gently through the upper sky, weaving faint melodies that soothed the entire world into sleep. As centuries passed, the new inhabitants began to grow curious about what lay beyond the lands they knew. The glass folk had seen far to the west the shadow of something vast, perhaps a mountain, perhaps a structure too distant to reach. The stone-born spoke of it as the remnant, and they treated it with sacred caution. Legend said that this place marked the last untouched ruins of the old world, still steeped in ancient energy. The dreamers hovered often above that region, sending streaks of violet and gold across the sky. Some glassfolk believed that the dreamers were trying to awaken whatever slept within the remnant. Others feared that the place was a wound, a scar left by the final war of Ooo, something that must remain sealed. But curiosity, as gentle as it was, could not be silenced forever. One day, a young glassfolk named Leora began a journey toward the distant horizon. She was unlike the others, more restless, filled with a strange longing that she couldn't name. While others found peace in remembering, she found meaning in searching. She said that the reflections in the lakes were beautiful, but they felt incomplete, like fragments of a lullaby missing its final verse. So Leora began to walk, her translucent feet glowing faintly with each step. The stone-born offered her blessings, touching her shoulders with hands that felt like the earth itself. The dreamers watched her departure from above, their colors softening to shades of silver and blue, the colors of night and memory intertwined. She promised to return with a story not one of the past, but of what might still come. Her journey through the empty plains marked the beginning of something new, a stirring that the world hadn't felt in ages. For the first time since Ooo had faded into myth, the quiet dream of existence began to move again, gently, toward discovery. Leora's journey began under the light of 3 moons, one bright, one faint, and one that pulsed like a living heart. She walked across silent valleys where the air shimmered with traces of old enchantments. Every few miles she passed strange remnants buried in the sand, the curve of a metal tower half swallowed by earth, the outline of a frozen flame, a shard of stained glass that hummed when touched. Each relic whispered softly, as though remembering the touch of hands long gone. She collected none of them. Instead, she simply listened, pressing her fingers to the ground and closing her eyes. The glass folk believed that all things, living or not, carried stories not in words, but in vibration. When she listened, she could feel the pulse of memory beneath her palms, as if the world itself was trying to tell her something too vast to speak aloud. After many days, the soft plains gave way to strange terrain. The soil darkened, turning glassy and uneven, reflecting her glowing form in scattered fragments. It felt as if she were walking on the frozen surface of a broken dream. The air was thicker here, filled with the scent of iron and something electric. Far ahead she could see the silhouette of the remnant, a towering structure rising from the horizon like the fossil of a god. It was enormous, older than any mountain, shaped like a half-buried crown. Jagged spires curved toward the sky, their tips humming with faint blue light. Around its base, the ground cracked open into glowing fissures, and faint streams of silver mist rose into the air. Some said this was where magic first entered the world. Others whispered it was where it finally went to rest. Leora felt no fear, only awe. The closer she walked, the more she sensed something stirring beneath her feet, a steady rhythm like breathing. The remnant was not lifeless. It was dreaming. At the threshold, she found carvings etched deep into the stone. They were worn, almost unreadable, but she could make out patterns, spirals, suns, and shapes that looked like faces. One, faintly glowing, resembled a small circle with 2 dots above it, the face of a being she couldn't name but somehow recognize. She reached out to touch it, and when her fingers met the surface, a wave of warmth flooded through her. Suddenly, light rippled across the walls. The remnant awakened, not violently, but like a deep sigh rising from the earth. The fissures around her widened, spilling soft streams of golden mist that drifted upward. For a moment, the air filled with echoes, laughter, music, and faint voices speaking in tones she couldn't understand. It was as if an entire civilization had been frozen in time, waiting for someone to listen again. In the mist, she saw glimpses, fragments of another world. A boy with a sword and a green backpack, running through fields of color. A shape-shifting dog laughing beside him. A woman with hair aflame and eyes like embers, standing in defiance of the dark. A vampire singing under a blood-red moon, and a pink figure smiling through time itself, watching over them all. Leora's heart ached without knowing why. The images faded quickly, leaving behind only the glow of the remnant, and a single lingering sound, a soft hum, almost like a lullaby vibrating through her bones. She understood somehow that this was not just memory. It was invitation. The dreamers began to gather above her, drawn to the awakening. Dozens of them, then hundreds, until the sky became a slow ocean of color. Their glow shimmered against the structure, forming reflections that danced across the ancient stone. The hum deepened, harmonizing with their silent song. For the first time, Leora realized that the dreamers were not just witnesses to the past, they were part of it. They were the memories made light, the spirits of those who once lived, reshaped into something eternal. Kneeling before the remnant, Leora whispered to the air. "What are you?" she asked softly, and though her voice trembled. The answer came not in words, but in feeling. The hum grew stronger, filling her with warmth, sorrow, and an overwhelming sense of love. It was as though the universe itself was remembering what it felt like to care, to dream, to be alive. And through her, it spoke again gently, reverently to the new world that had forgotten its origins. The glass folk far away felt it too. Across the glowing plains, their songs faltered as they turned toward the distant horizon, sensing the pulse echo through their very cores. The stone-born looked to the sky, their eyes brightening like dawn. Even the air itself seemed to pause, the rivers quieting, as if listening to something divine. In that moment, the remnant ceased to be a ruin. It became a beacon, the heart of the new age, awake at last. Light poured gently from the crown-shaped structure, flowing across the land like a slow sunrise. It wasn't blinding or fierce, it was soft, a calm illumination that made the world feel newly awake. Every crack in the old earth shimmered with threads of color, and every blade of grass caught the glow as though kissed by dawn. Leora stood at the center of it all, her translucent form filled with that same radiance. For the first time, she felt truly alive, not just as a descendant of the world before, but as part of something far greater. The dreamers circled high above her, their light weaving into spirals that mirrored the old patterns carved into the remnant's walls. It was as if the sky and the earth were remembering one another after 1,000 years apart. The hum deepened again, slow and resonant, wrapping everything in a single rhythm. Leora realized it was not merely a sound, it was language, ancient and kind. The remnant was speaking, not to her alone, but to all living things. Across the glowing plains, the glassfolk felt their veins shimmer with new light. Their voices rose in soft song, carried by instinct rather than thought. The stone-born stirred in the mountains, their bodies vibrating with harmony as tiny crystals bloomed from their shoulders like flowers of light. And high above, the dreamers sang without words, tracing paths of color that formed constellations no one had seen before. Through this shared song, the message became clear. The world was not ending. It was remembering itself. The remnant began to shift, its immense surface rippling like water, the cracks filled with luminous energy that climbed toward the sky, branching into delicate strands. Where they touched the air, something miraculous happened. The light folded inward, solidifying to shape forests of glass and silver, growing from pure radiance, rivers winding through them like liquid moonlight. The new world was beginning to reshape itself, guided by memory and balance rather than power. Leora stepped forward, feeling her feet sink into the warm, glowing soil. It was no longer barren. It was alive again, teeming with the hum of the old magic reborn as something gentler. Around her, shapes began to emerge from the light, small, delicate creatures with shimmering wings, others that looked like blossoms learning to breathe. They blinked at her curiously, and she felt their warmth like the first breeze of spring. The dreamers lowered themselves closer to the surface, their forms touching the newly risen trees. Wherever they brushed, the leaves glowed brighter, pulsing like living stars. The glassfolk who had followed Leora's light from afar arrived at the edge of this blooming land. They fell to their knees, awestruck, whispering her name like a prayer. But Leora only smiled, her voice a calm murmur. "It isn't me," she said. "It's the world waking up." And she was right. The remnant's hum began to fade into a softer, steadier tone, no longer an awakening call, but a heartbeat. The world itself was now alive in a new way, aware of its own continuity. This was not a rebirth of Ooo, nor a simple continuation. It was something different, something that carried the kindness of all that came before, yet moved with a patience that the old world never knew. The glassfolk named this new land Auravine, meaning the place where dreams take root. It became a place of gentle creation, a sanctuary for life born from reflection rather than need. The Stoneborn built quiet monoliths around the remnant to protect its calm glow, not as guards, but as keepers of balance. And the dreamers continued to drift above, now moving in slower, steadier patterns as though their endless song had found its resting place at last. Generations passed again, and stories formed around that single event. Children of glass and stone grew up learning of the wanderer Leora, the one who had walked into the sleeping crown and heard the voice of the old world. They didn't speak of her as a hero, but as a listener, the first who truly heard what the silence had been trying to say. In time, even her story faded into legend, absorbed into the hum of the living land. But the rhythm she awakened remained everywhere, in the rustle of the silver forests, in the song of the dreamers as they crossed the night sky, in the heartbeat of the remnant beneath the soil. The world no longer needed to remember names or faces to carry their essence. Every particle of it glowed with quiet understanding. Far beyond, where the stars hung low and the horizon shimmered with eternal twilight, a new kind of light began to appear, faint, curious, like the blink of a newborn star. It was said that this was where Auravine would one day meet other worlds, just as Ooo had risen from the ruins of Earth. The dream, it seemed, was not over. It had simply learned to breathe more softly. And so the new inhabitants lived in harmony, not in search of adventure or conquest, but in the joy of existing together, remembering together, dreaming together. Their world was made not of kingdoms and crowns, but of echoes and compassion, a lullaby written in the language of all that had ever lived. In the quiet glow of the remnant, under skies filled with slow singing light, the universe began its next story, one born not from chaos but from peace. The world had grown quiet again, not the stillness of loss or the silence of endings, but the kind of quiet that comes when everything has found its place. The light from the remnant pulsed faintly beneath the earth like the steady heartbeat of a sleeping god, and above it, Auravine stretched wide and peaceful. Forests of glass whispered in the wind. Rivers sang in tones too low for words. The dreamers drifted like silver moons across the sky, their colors fading into a permanent dawn. But beyond all that beauty, beyond even the gentle hum of the living world, something else stirred not within Auravine, but outside it, in the space between worlds. The Dream Beyond Ooo had begun. It started, as all things did, with a ripple. One night, a single dreamer began to glow brighter than the rest, its form pulsing with every hue the world could imagine. It hovered above the remnant, perfectly still, then suddenly released a soft wave of light that spread across the horizon. For a moment, every creature, glassfolk, stone-born, even the smallest lights in the soil lifted their heads. They could feel something vast pressing gently against their thoughts, not frightening, but infinite. The wave reached the edge of the sky and did not stop. It pushed outward, flowing into the void beyond their star, where space was not black, but full of sleeping colors. In that unseen realm, echoes of countless other worlds floated, old dreams, forgotten civilizations, places that once burned bright and were now only dust and memory. The light from Auravine brushed against them, waking something faint but alive. The dreamers, who had always drifted in silence, began to move with purpose. They gathered at the upper edge of the atmosphere, forming a slow spiral that reached toward the stars. The pattern they created was vast, larger than continents, and as it shimmered, it resembled something familiar, a tree, its branches stretching outward into the cosmos. The tree of universes, perhaps reborn not in matter, but in memory. Leora's descendants watched from below, their bodies reflecting the starlight. They didn't understand what they were seeing, but they felt its meaning deep within them, that the dream of their world was being carried outward, woven into something greater. Some believed the dreamers were leaving to share Auravine's song with distant realms. Others said they were following the last path of magic itself, returning to the source of all creation. And perhaps both were true. Because the dreamers were not merely creatures anymore, they had become conduits, the thoughts of worlds long gone, transformed into messengers of continuity. Within their light were the final echoes of everything that ever was, the laughter of a human boy, the warmth of his brother's loyalty, the songs of vampires, the wisdom of elemental spirits, the kindness of those who ruled and those who wandered. Every note, every fragment of Ooo now existed within that swirling light. Far beyond Auravine, as the dreamers drifted through the endless dark, they began to encounter other lights, other clusters of color, other pulses of song. They weren't alone. Somewhere, perhaps very far away, another world had also dreamed itself awake. Its light was different, colder, more metallic, but still alive, still curious. The two waves of light brushed against each other gently, merging for a heartbeat before drifting apart again. It was a greeting, the first meeting between dreams born from different worlds. And so the cosmos began to hum again. Not as it once did during the time of gods and chaos, but in a softer, more balanced tone, the slow shared breath of countless worlds remembering they existed together. Each world was unique, yet connected, through the same quiet pulse that began in Ooo, then in Auravine, and now in the stars beyond. Back on the surface, the people felt it too. The rivers rippled without wind, the trees swayed to an invisible rhythm, and the night sky filled with the gentle movement like the whole universe was breathing in harmony. The glass folk watched in awe while the stone-born bowed their heads, understanding that what was happening was sacred. The dream beyond Ooo was not destruction or rebirth. It was expansion. It was the slow realization that the story never ends. It only changes its language, spreading from one dream to the next, forever gentle, forever alive. Somewhere deep beneath the shimmering skies, an old echo stirred. It came from a place untouched by the new light, a quiet cavern beneath the remnant, where time had slowed almost to stillness. The cavern was lined with crystal veins glowing faintly with memories that once belonged to the old world. When the wave of light passed through the planet, those crystals began to hum, resonating with forgotten voices. Within their glow, faint images flickered the tree fort. Now nothing but memory. A grass sword lying on the ground, a tiny computer's blinking face, a crown of ice melting into light. Each fragment whispered not of what was lost, but of what had become eternal through memory. The dream beyond Ooo was reaching even here, pulling these final ghosts gently toward its light. Above, in the luminous forest, the glass folk gathered to watch the sky. The spiral of dreamers now stretched across half the heavens, each pulse of light sending out ripples that shimmered across the atmosphere like waves on an endless ocean. The elders believed it was a calling, an invitation to dream further than flesh or memory. They told their children that one day when the heart of Auravine beat for the last time, they too would rise into that spiral and join the symphony beyond the stars. Leora's youngest descendant, a small being of translucent amber, stood on a cliff overlooking the glowing plains. Her reflection shimmered in the glass surface of a nearby lake. She whispered to the sky, asking what lay beyond the light, if the dreamers ever came back, or if they simply dissolved into the great quiet. The water rippled, and for a moment, she thought she saw a face, kind eyes beneath a hat, smiling faintly before fading. Something deep within her understood. The dream was not meant to return. It was meant to continue forward. Each world was a step in an infinite chain of dreaming, each age giving birth to another. The boy with the hat had dreamed once, and his dream had become a world. Now this world was dreaming too. The dreamers rose higher. The colors of their spiral began to merge until they formed a single column of light piercing through the sky. Those who watched from below described it as a dawn that never ended, a pathway made not of matter but of purpose, and at its base the remnant glowed brighter, pulsing in harmony. Then something extraordinary happened. The light from the remnant began to ascend not like smoke or flame, but like memory taking form. It coiled upward, joining the spiral, carrying with it the last traces of the old magic. For a brief moment, all of Auravine was illuminated, mountains, rivers, fields, and cities shining together as one. Every creature stopped and looked upward. The entire world seemed to understand that it was part of something greater. The stars themselves appeared to move, rearranging into constellations that told stories. A dog with long limbs, a girl of flame, a candy crown, a wizard's hat. Each shimmered for a few moments, then blended back into the sky. The universe was remembering them, rewriting their legends in light. When the glow faded, the world did not dim completely. Instead, everything was softer, calmer and warmer, as if the dreamers had left behind a parting gift. The forest sang faint lullabies at dusk. Rivers sparkled with faint reflections of constellations that shouldn't exist, and every sleeping creature dreamed of the same thing, a horizon filled with golden clouds, and a feeling that something beautiful waited just beyond it. The glass folk began to call this time the Great Softness. It was said that during this age, even sorrow could no longer linger for long, because the world itself seemed to cradle every thought in light. The stone-born, ever practical, believed it was simply the natural settling of cosmic energy. But in quiet moments, even they admitted that the world now felt like it was being gently watched over by something vast, loving and ancient. And far away, where the dreamers drifted beyond sight, the cosmic sea shimmered with faint outlines of new worlds forming. The dream was spreading one pulse at a time, building the architecture of infinity. The dream beyond Ooo had become a current through which creation itself continued to breathe, eternally weaving stories out of silence. In the quiet aftermath of that awakening light, the world settled into a peace that felt endless. The wind carried the faint hum of the dreamer's ascent, a melody that seemed to blend with the rhythm of the stars themselves. The glass folk called it the sleep of the sky, believing it was the universe's way of resting after creating something so vast and bright. Nights became softer. Even the darkness felt kind, holding the land like a blanket woven from the remnants of countless dreams. In the valleys of Auravine, the descendants of every creature, the sweet, the strange, the mineral, the spectral, began to live with an unspoken understanding. They no longer built cities of ambition, nor crafted towers of glass to chase the heavens. Instead, they shaped their homes within the land itself. Hollowed mountains became quiet sanctuaries of light. Fields of crystalline grass swayed around small villages that glowed gently from within, never brighter than a candle's flame. They told stories at dusk, sitting in circles while the stars whispered above them. They spoke of the world before theirs of Ooo, and of the heroes who had once walked under the same sun. But these stories no longer sounded like myths of grandeur or battle. They were lullabies of connection. The boy who sang to a vampire queen. The dog who laughed even when the world crumbled. The princess who built sweetness from chaos. They were not gods or legends anymore. They were dreams that had once walked on earth, and through the dreaming, they had given birth to life itself. And somewhere between these tales, a quiet truth began to form that perhaps the purpose of dreaming was not to escape the world, but to make it gentler. The beings of this new age began to live by this belief. They no longer sought to uncover the ancient powers buried in the earth. They no longer searched for crowns or swords or artifacts of forgotten might. They looked inward, understanding that the remnants of those magics still glowed within their own hearts. Yet even in this tranquil era, something vast continued to move in the background. The dream beyond Ooo was not finished. Every night, when the sky shimmered like glass dust, subtle shapes could be seen moving within the light-new constellations being drawn, outlines of beings that might one day awaken into form. The universe was still building itself through stories, each tale breathing life into another. Somewhere near the edge of the known world, there was said to be a great mirror lake, perfectly still and endless in depth. Those who visited it claim, that if you stared into it long enough, you could see not only your reflection, but your reflection's reflection, infinite layers of yourself dreaming further and further away until the final image was not of a person at all, but of a star being born. A traveler once stood before that lake, a wanderer wrapped in a simple cloak of pale green. No one knew her origin, but she carried with her a small shard of blue glass tied around her neck. She was known as Mira, and some whispered she was the last descendant of an ancient line of heroes, though she never claimed such a title. She only said she felt something calling her in her dreams, a soft, persistent voice whispering from beyond the stars. One evening, As she gazed upon the mirror lake, she felt the world hold its breath. The surface of the water began to shimmer, not with her reflection, but with visions of other worlds, places where different skies burned, where oceans sang in colors unseen. And in each, she saw faint echoes of familiar shapes, a tower built from candy crystal, a mechanical heart, a sword forged from grass. They flickered and faded like ripples in eternity. Mira smiled, not out of surprise, but recognition. She whispered softly that the dream was still alive. It had simply changed form. She dipped her hand into the lake, and the shard around her neck began to glow, humming with an ancient resonance. For the briefest moment, the world around her seemed to dissolve into starlight. She saw the endless chain of dreaming world after world, each born from the quiet imagination of the one before. When she returned to herself, standing once more beneath the vast, serene sky, she understood. The dream beyond Ooo was not somewhere to go. It was something that continued through every act of kindness, through every small story told by firelight, through every child who wondered what lay beyond the hills. It was the gentle heartbeat of existence itself. And so Mira walked back into the valleys, her path glowing faintly beneath her feet. The light from her shard pulsed like a quiet star guiding her way. As she passed through sleeping villages and glowing forests, the world seemed to respond to her presence, flowers opening under moonlight, rivers whispering like old friends. The dream was moving with her, not ahead, not behind, but through her. By the time dawn arrived, a new warmth spread across the horizon. The light no longer came from a single source in the sky. It rose from everywhere, from the ground, from the trees, from the hearts of all who still dreamed. The age of Ooo had long since faded, but what it left behind was eternal, the will to keep imagining, to keep loving, to keep dreaming beyond the end. As the days passed into years and the years into quiet centuries, Mira's story became one of many whispered through the lands of Auravine. The people didn't build monuments to her. They didn't carve her likeness into stone or paint her image on the walls of their sanctuaries. Instead, they told her story softly around fires and gardens of glass, or while resting beneath the great trees that hummed with memory. They told it the way one tells a dream they don't want to forget, even if they know it will fade by morning. They said that wherever she walked, the ground shimmered for a moment after her steps, not because of power, but because the dream itself recognized her. They said she didn't disappear, but simply walked far enough that her footsteps became part of the horizon. And in that horizon, the dream beyond Ooo opened wide. Generations passed, and the beings of this new age learned to listen to the quiet instead of fearing it. The echoes of old magic had long been absorbed into the breath of the world, not loud or commanding, but soft and nurturing. Rivers glowed faintly under moonlight, feeding trees that bloomed with translucent petals shaped like stars. The sky shifted through gentle colors as though the world itself was breathing, and every dusk arrived like a deep sigh after a long day of dreaming. Children of glass and stone, of light and air, grew up learning not about battles or thrones, but about stillness, about the small miracles that happen when one simply paid attention. They studied how the stars whispered to each other. They mapped the constellations that appeared only once in a lifetime. They discovered that their own thoughts could shape the faintest ripples of reality. To them, dreaming was no longer something done in sleep. It was how they lived. One night, under a sky filled with thousands of pale spirals of light, a young child sat by a window of polished quartz. The air was calm, and the faint hum of the world filled the silence like a heartbeat. In the reflection of the glass, she saw herself surrounded by faint silhouettes, figures of light who smiled gently back at her. Some had faces she recognized from the stories told at dusk. A boy with a hat, a dog made of shifting gold, a flame that moved like laughter. They didn't speak, but she could feel their warmth. She asked quietly what they were. One of them, the faint outline of a tall, soft figure, placed a hand against the glass, and for a moment, the boundary between dream and world disappeared. She heard a voice, no louder than a sigh, telling her that everything she saw, everything she loved, had once been a dream, too, that she was part of the same current, part of the same light that flowed from world to world, that she would one day dream her own world into being. The child smiled and whispered that she hoped her dream would be gentle. The figures nodded and slowly faded back into the quiet shimmer of starlight. Outside, the night stretched endlessly, filled with drifting ribbons of color. The spiral of dreamers had long since dissolved, but their energy lingered woven into the fabric of the universe like threads of gold in a vast tapestry. Each thread represented a story that would never truly end. Every world was a page, every age a verse. The Dream Beyond Ooo was the song that carried them all forward. If you listened closely, you could still hear its melody, not from the stars above, but from within a quiet, rhythmic pulse, steady and eternal. It was a song of life continuing, even when all seemed still, the same song that had once echoed through a land of candy, ice, and fire, the same song that had carried heroes, kings, and dreamers into new beginnings. Now that song was everywhere, in the breath of sleeping mountains, in the ripples across mirror lakes, in the hush between heartbeats. It was the sound of the dream remembering itself. And in that endless, tender cycle, Ooo was never truly gone. It had only changed its name. Perhaps that's how every story ends, not with silence, but with a softer sound, too deep and too loving to ever fade away. The universe itself drifting into rest, ready to dream again. So if you find yourself lying beneath the stars tonight, let your mind wander to that faraway place, to the quiet hills of our ravine, to the glowing rivers and glass forests, to the gentle beings who live by starlight. Imagine their world and how it grew from the ashes of another. Imagine the boy and the dog, and how their laughter still echoes across eternity. And as you drift into sleep, remember this: every dream, no matter how small, adds its light to the great story beyond the stars. Good night.